You are listening to the 16th episode of the Armchair Army podcast. I actually do not have a guest today, but that is just fine because we have a ton of things to go over. We have some NFL, college football. We even go over some NBA as well. So, bunch of things to get to. I actually have a special announcement. Not a special announcement, I guess you would call it, but an announcement. Just remember, next Tuesday, Adam Amin, ESPN's own Adam Amin, is going to be on the Armchair Army podcast. So really excited to have Adam on to talk some football, talk some Cougs. He was there during the WSU and USC game, and he's going to talk about the atmosphere of Martin Stadium. So you're not going to want to miss that. But without further ado, let's get started with this. Let's roll. Like I said, we have a bunch to get to today. So I actually wanted to start because we don't have that much to talk about the NBA, but I wanted to start with the Thunder. In the past couple of weeks, I've talked about the Thunder and the, struggles that they have really been having with meshing with Russ and Paul George and Carmelo Anthony. But they've lost again 4 of their last 5. They're 6 games below 500 and having one of the worst seasons that the Thunder have had in recent years. And they probably have the best team that they have had in years. And so really, really struggling Thunder. I actually don't know what they can do to pick themselves up out of this drought that they're on. Quite honestly, I think that Russ is one of those players that he's very, very good, but he's hard to build a playbook around just because he's so good at improving and making his own shot. And so having Paul George and Carmelo there is cramping his style a little bit. I know he's a team player. His personality is more towards a team player, but he's really struggled here, and it's kind of a bummer because I'd really love to see the OKC Thunder and the Warriors match up in a Western Conference Finals or even before that in a divisional round, but really interesting to kind of watch for going down the stretch. I think that the Thunder are going to figure it out, but if they don't by the deadline, if I was the Thunder GM here, you got to think about maybe selling at the deadline. Melo most likely is not going to sign after this year. So it will probably be best for them to get maybe some draft picks, maybe even a role player to play with Russell Westbrook and Paul George. I think Paul George is actually going to stay there, so I think it would be really interesting if you added maybe just a counterpiece to Russ and Paul George. But yeah, the Thunder have been playing really, really bad, and it's been quite honestly one of the worst teams to watch just because it seems like they're so out of sync all the time. But that's kind of my Thunder takes. I don't really have much on the NBA today just because it's pretty much status quo. The Celtics have won a bunch in a row. They actually got their streak snapped, but they're playing really, really well, and so that's not something we can talk about. But the Warriors have been playing well. They're right on track. Curry's shooting again around 40%, so he's shooting lights out once again this year. And then the other thing I actually want to talk about that actually will be in a segment was LeBron actually getting tossed from a game for the first time in his career. He finally got in trouble for mouthing off to a ref. He's had so much leeway, I feel like, in the past. He really has. He's been arguing call after call after call, and this year it finally got him in trouble and got him ejected from the game. So I don't know. I'm not a LeBron huge homer, so seeing him get tossed is kind of to my pleasure. But I guess it's just, I don't know. He's just such a crybaby all the time, and he's so great as a player, and I understand that. I feel like how he whines on the court is just like so it doesn't tarnish his reputation, but for me it's like you're so much better than that why are you doing that to yourself? So that's the only thing I have to say about LeBron. I'll talk about him a little bit later. He may end up on my good vibe, bad vibe, just being a bad vibe for how he acts on the court, but that is going to be my basketball talk because we have so much football to get to. I wanted to talk, first of all, about some NFL before we get to college football because college football is jam-packed. So NFL, one of the storylines, Garoppolo is going to start for the 49ers this weekend. That's going to be a really interesting thing to watch for. His only throw last weekend against the Seahawks was a touchdown. So I guess take it for what it's worth. But Garoppolo, he is what he is. He's going to be the future of the 49ers. I don't know why they put him in this late in the season. I know they just got him from the New England Patriots, but it seems like they would want to hold him over until next season. He learns the playbook, learns more, rather than destroy his confidence with a really bad team that they have surrounding him. So it will be interesting to see what he does this weekend, but Garoppolo is starting. Big story there. In other news, I guess, here in the Northwest, the Seahawks, Cam Chancellor's done for the season. They finally announced it. This has been coming for a couple of weeks, but he finally announced it. And then Pete Carroll on top of that was talking about how he has a decision to make about his future in the NFL, not just this season, which makes me really sad because Cam Chancellor's obviously one of the best players, not only in the NFL, but he absolutely kills people on the field. I mean, his hits, he's called the enforcer for a reason, and his hits are second to none, really. And I'm going to miss him in the backfield if he decides to hang it up. Him and Earl Thomas, one of the best safety duo, not just in the league this year, last year, whatever, but all time. I think you can put him up there for that. So kind of sad Seahawks news. Good for the 49ers with Garoppolo starting. Other than that, the status quo in the NFL, the Patriots are still good. Yes, Tom Brady is still good. In the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles are still good. JHI, I saw, just a little Boise plug. But JHI, I saw, was kind of upset. He only got 5 carries, which was kind of weird because he got more carries in his first week than he did in his second week. You would think he knows the playbook a little more, but it might have just been how they were calling plays. But I knew he was a little frustrated, which, if you're winning, I feel like as a player, that's like my one pet peeve. You cannot complain about playing time or how many carries you're getting if the team is winning. If the team is losing and you want more carries, that's just fine. But if you're winning, I have a real problem with it just because it looks so bad on you not being a team player. It's one of those things. But, yeah, JJ, figure it out. Your Miami Dolphins were bad. This is your time to shine. Do it in the right way. But I wanted to talk a lot about the college football this week because obviously we are dwindling down. We've got the conference championships this weekend. We got Miami, Clemson. We have Georgia, Auburn. Huge implications on the college football playoff. Alabama is at number 5 right now, so they are trying to sneak into the playoff after, I guess, the SEC championship is over. If Auburn wins, they're definitely in the college football playoff, and I believe that knocks Alabama out. But if Georgia wins this weekend, I believe they have a real shot at getting Alabama actually in the playoff. I don't think Georgia has a shot to be in there, quite honestly. I think if I were to do it right now, I believe that, number one, you'd have Clemson. You'd have, obviously, the SEC. You'd have Auburn in there. I believe that they're going to win this weekend against Georgia. I think you're going to have Oklahoma in there. And then, this is tough because right now that's 3 conferences represented. And the 4th one, obviously, if Wisconsin wins this weekend, that's going to put them over the top. There's no way you put a 1-loss Alabama over a Wisconsin. I believe it with Wisconsin and Alabama played. Obviously, I think Alabama would crush Wisconsin, but you can't fault a team, and this may be my Boise State homer showing, but you can't fault a team for being undefeated. I mean, I know that they make their schedule years and years ahead, but, I mean, come on. You cannot fault them for being undefeated, and if you're Alabama, you have to be kicking yourself because you scheduled Mercer a week before you scheduled Auburn for the Iron Bowl. And you losing to Auburn is going to kick you out of the playoff because your strength of schedule is like, before the Auburn game, it was like 65th, which was far and beyond worse than any team in the top 10 rankings. So they only have themselves to blame. Stop scheduling FCS schools. You scheduled Fresno State and Colorado State. Although I actually believe that those are good teams because I watch a lot of Mountain West football. I don't think that if you're Alabama and you're trying to be a leader and lead by example in college football, that's a good example to set by having out all these out-of-conference games that are basically cupcakes, and then faulting everyone else for having cupcake schedules. So if I had to do it now, I think it's going to be Clemson, Auburn, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. I don't think the Clemson-Miami game is going to be close. Shout out Miles Clifford. I know you don't think it's going to be close either. Miles Clifford thought that Oklahoma-TCU would be the closest game this weekend, and I believe he's right. I actually think TCU has an opportunity to win this game, which would make the college football playoff just absolute chaos, because if this happens, then I believe that Alabama would actually get in, and then 2 SEC teams would get in. It would be Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, and then Wisconsin. But even crazier, just think about this and some food for thought. If Clemson loses to Miami, if Auburn loses to Georgia, and Wisconsin loses to Ohio State, this committee would have an absolute nightmare on their hands, which I obviously know they don't want. So big things coming up for the committee and college football. But my 4 again: Clemson, Auburn, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. I think Auburn's going to beat Georgia. I believe that Georgia's good, but Jake Fromm and that freshman, Shane Larson and I from the Game Time Guru were talking about him earlier this week. And if you watch QB1, it was on G60, and it was a really, really cool documentary that you can stream online. With Jake Fromm in high school. It actually took Tate Martell, Jake Fromm, and then another kid that is now playing for Wake Forest. They took those 3 and took them through their high school years, senior years, and it's cool to see Jake Fromm do well, but he's still a freshman, so I still have that game in the back of my head, that Georgia game where they got absolutely hammered. I have it fresh in my mind, and I feel like Jake Fromm's just not ready for that big stage, especially not the SEC championship. If Georgia's going to win this game, it's going to be Nick Chubb, and I really believe that they have to establish the run game. The only problem is Auburn is one of the best defensive lines in the country, so they match up really, really well against Georgia, and that's kind of my thinking going into this game is Auburn just has Stidham, which is going to be more experienced than Jake Fromm, and that's really going to take them over the top. With the Clemson game, I just don't believe that Miami's quarterback is just playing so awful, and it's not really even close. He's playing really, really bad. So I don't really believe in him. I believe that Clemson's going to take over that game and win that one. And then the TCU-Oklahoma, I know it's going to be close, but I actually think that Oklahoma's going to take this one. I know Kenny Hill's going to have a good game, and Baker Mayfield's going to have another Heisman game. And I'm pretty sure that Baker Mayfield already locked up the Heisman, speaking of college football. But I think that this game's not going to be as close as people think. Or I think it's going to be closer than people think, because I think TCU is going to have a better game than they did earlier in the season versus Oklahoma on a neutral site. So, and then the last game that's going to have some playoff implications is the Wisconsin-Ohio State game. I actually am going to predict that Ohio State wins this game. I don't think Wisconsin is as good as people think. I know JT Barrett might not play, but I believe that Wisconsin is going to be just outmatched by Ohio State. I know Wisconsin hasn't played many people. They are a good team. They're a top 10 team, but they're not in my top 4. Really, if they lose, they're definitely not in my top 4, even though they have one loss. But if they win, they definitely deserve it. I don't think they're a top 4 team talent-wise, but I mean, you got to hand it to them. You can't leave out an undefeated team. That would just destroy the meaning of college football, the college football playoff, and make us want to go back to the BCS era, which would be awful. Another team that we haven't talked about a lot because they really aren't in the rankings, you would say, the top 4 rankings, you would say, is the best group of 5 team, and that's UCF. And the Knights have played so well. And I know Quentin Flowers last week gave them a good run for their money at UCF. And if you haven't heard of Quentin Flowers' story, that was one of the most incredible stories that you've ever heard. He lost his mom, he lost his dad, he lost his brother in a drive-by shooting, and he came out on senior day. And he came out on senior day by himself. He actually went out with Coach Charlie Strong for his senior day, and it was one of the saddest things that I've seen. They highlighted on ESPN during the USF game, but just really cool story. Quentin Flowers, one of the best passers in USF history, and really one of the best college quarterbacks that there is in college football. Obviously, it's probably not going to translate to the NFL, but really fun to watch. Rooting for Quentin Flowers going forward. They couldn't pull it off against UCF. If you watch that USF-UCF game, that was nuts. I mean, within a minute, you had USF tie it up, and then on the ensuing kickoff, you had UCF run it back for a touchdown. USF, down 7, was rolling, and they go to the about 30-yard line, and they end up fumbling after they're driving downfield. So kind of a bummer for USF. Boise State fans were closely watching that game because we wanted USF to lose, and then UCF to lose, and then USF to run the table and get past Memphis as well in the American Championship. But UCF, they're in the top 10 for the first time this year, undefeated. They are the most deserving, obviously, team in the Group of 5 conference. They will most likely go to the Peach Bowl. I saw a prediction that they would play Georgia, and quite honestly, I was telling my friends that if Boise State played Georgia, they would get trolled by like 50. So I'm actually kind of happy that we're not the Group of 5 representative. But that is going to be all for my college football playoff talk and college football talk. It's just been a crazy, crazy year. I can't believe it's almost over, really. But it's been absolutely awesome to watch some college football conference championships this weekend. Don't miss them. They're going to be really, really fun. Speaking of some college football, on the last note that I have, Boise State plays Fresno State this weekend in the Mountain West Championship. They play on the blue in Boise. They should be able to win this game and go to Las Vegas. The last prediction I saw was that we would play Oregon. That would be really, really fun. I know that Coach Harsin would love to go to Vegas and play in that game after how the season started out. But fun game. The Mountain West first team and second team all-league players came out this week, and Leighton Vander Esch won the Defensive Player of the Year. So really, really cool. Former walk-on. If you knew where he's from, he comes from a high school that's less than like 50 people. He played 8-man football, and it was absolutely awesome to see him across the Mountain West divisional games, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year. Really cool to see. And there's other first teamers as well. Mason Hampton got first team, and I saw Tyler Horton on the list as well. Avery Williams got second team all league for returner. I thought that could have been a little bit better. He ran, I know the beginning of the season he ran 2 back and has been crushing it all year for us. He's been fair catch happy the last couple of games, but that is going to be my college football talk. We talk some NFL. We talk some NBA. We are actually going to get into some segments here. I have good vibes, bad vibes. So my good vibe of the week is actually going to come from last Saturday. The good vibe, the Iron Bowl. Absolutely so much fun to watch. Not only Auburn win that game, but it was really fun to just watch a really competitive game and see that Auburn could match up with Alabama. While I was watching the Apple Cup and watching Boise State lose, it was good to have a little good vibe on my side with the Iron Bowl. Speaking of bad vibe, I was going to put LeBron in my bad vibe this week, but my bad vibe is actually going to be the Cougs. I mean, not even showing up in the Apple Cup. It was so disheartening watching it in Spokane and watching it with a bunch of Coug fans. I was really, really disappointed in how Luke Falk played. The game plan just looked like they were outmatched from the beginning, and it was honestly one of the worst games that they've played all year, minus the Cal game where Luke Falk threw 5 picks, but just a really disappointing and huge bummer for the Cougs because not only did they lose, but UW didn't even win the Pac-12 North. UW winning gave Stanford the Pac-12 North, so UW really wasn't playing for that much. And we'll see where the Cougs end up. I've seen a couple predictions for them, but they're not going to end up in a crazy bowl this year, which was a bummer because it's Luke Falk's senior year. But yeah, they're my bad vibe of the week, just not showing up in Seattle. I knew that UW was good, but man, that was really, really disheartening to watch them not play their best against a rival team like the Huskies. But That is going to be good vibes, bad vibes. I actually have one more segment that we are going to introduce. It's called Chair Facts, where me and my guests are going to introduce one or two chair facts that you may not know. They can be funny, they can be real, they can be statistical, they can be whatever you want. But my chair fact of the week is actually going to be Geno Smith still playing in the NFL. If you didn't know already, he still plays for the Giants, and the Giants benched Eli Manning. And until quite recently, I didn't know Geno Smith still had a job in the NFL. So that is going to be my chair fact of the week. If you don't know, now you know that Geno Smith still has a job in the NFL. And I'm not going to get into Kaepernick stuff because I don't really like Kaepernick, and for reasons that other than him kneeling, mainly because he's from Nevada and he played for the 49ers and he sucks. Geno Smith has a job instead of him, and like 99% of people that are better than Geno Smith, Mark Sanchez, for God's sake, should have a job instead of him. I couldn't believe it when I heard that Geno Smith not only had a job, but is now going to start over Eli Manning. So that's going to be my chair fact of the day. That is actually going to be the podcast for this week. Thank you for joining me on the 16th episode of the Armchair Army podcast. I appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you listen to next Tuesday's episode. We have Adam Amin, remember, from ESPN. He's going to talk some Cougs, his favorite place to eat across the country. He's also going to plug a very special Boise restaurant as well. So thank you guys for joining me again. You guys have a great rest of your weekend. Make sure you watch those conference championship games. And have a great rest of your weekend.